A single mother quietly pushed an old flower cart along the rugged road. Beside her was Thien, her 10-year-old son, carrying a small basket of supplies to help his mother. His small feet hurriedly stepped forward, trying to keep pace with her steady stride. Thien's face radiated innocence, yet his eyes held a hint of contemplation, reflecting the image of a soul that had matured too soon through hardship. A sudden gust of cold wind swept through, slipping under Mai's thin coat, making her shiver. She instinctively pulled her faded scarf tighter around her neck, seeking the last remnants of warmth. Her jet black hair cascaded loosely over her slender shoulders, and each of her steps left a faint imprint on the damp earth. Despite her petite frame, Mai exuded the resilience of someone who had weathered life's storms. However, if one looked deeply into her eyes, they would see an unspoken sorrow, like old scars that had healed yet still ached whenever the wind changed. "Thien, walk faster, son. It looks like it's going to rain soon," Mai reminded him, her voice gentle but tinged with concern. She cast a quick glance at the sky, where heavy gray clouds were gathering, obscuring the sun and signaling an approaching downpour. The world around them grew eerily silent, as if every sound had been swallowed, leaving only the whisper of the wind through distant trees. Thien looked up at his mother, his round, clear eyes filled with empathy for struggles he was still too young to fully comprehend. "Mom, let me push the cart for you," he said softly, his voice light yet firm with determination. Mai smiled and gently stroked his hair. "My son, you're so good, but just walk beside me. That's enough." The mother and son continued on their way, their shadows stretching long across the misty road. In the distance, the wind howled, carrying with it a biting cold that deepened the silence, making the atmosphere even more somber. Mai's heart quivered with an indescribable feeling. She glanced up at the sky once more, not just out of concern for the approaching rain, but because of an unshakable sense of unease, as if something momentous awaited her at the end of this road. As Mai and her son neared the turn leading to the highway, the fragile morning serenity was suddenly shattered by the piercing screech of tires skidding violently against the pavement. The sharp metallic crash that followed was deafening and ominous, like a distant warning echoing through the air, causing the entire space to fall into an eerie stillness. Before Mai's eyes, a black car sped recklessly along the bumpy road, swerving uncontrollably before slamming into an ancient roadside tree. The impact was so powerful that the ground seemed to tremble, and golden leaves rained down, drifting through the smoke-laden air. The sudden explosion of noise made Mai freeze in place. Her eyes widened in shock, reflecting pure terror. For a brief moment, her heart seemed to stop, then pounded erratically as panic surged through her veins. Beside her, Thien clung tightly to her hand, his small fingers ice cold with fear. "Mom, don't go over there," he pleaded, his voice trembling. Smoke began to rise from the front of the car, curling into the air, carrying the suffocating stench of burning gasoline. Through the dust-covered windshield, Mai caught a glimpse of a man slumped motionless over the steering wheel. Blood trickled from the man's forehead, staining his white shirt a deep crimson, an image both haunting and grim. With each passing second, the smoke thickened, signaling that the flames could erupt at any moment. Mai stood frozen for a brief moment, yet inside her mind, thoughts churned violently. Time seemed to stop, leaving only the thunderous pounding of her heart in her chest. But the instincts of a mother, of a human being unable to ignore a life in danger, drove her to act. She turned to Thien, gripping his shoulders firmly as she bent down to meet his gaze. Her voice was urgent, yet steady. "Thien, listen to me. Stay right here. Do not follow me. I'll be back soon." She gently stroked his cheek, as if to reassure him, then spun around and sprinted toward the car. The air around the vehicle was thick with the acrid stench of gasoline and smoke. Small sparks crackled from the front of the car, flickering ominously. As Mai moved closer, she coughed harshly from the fumes, but didn't stop. Through the fractured windshield, she could now see the man's pale face more clearly. He lay motionless, his breaths faint, his limp hand hanging loosely by the driver's seat. Mai grasped the door handle and pulled with all her might, but the frame was crushed and jammed, as rigid as solid steel. Gritting her teeth, she tightened her grip and mustered every ounce of strength for one desperate yank. "I can't leave him here. Come on, Mai. Just a little more," she whispered to herself, wheeling her body forward. And finally, after what felt like an impossible struggle, the door burst open with a long, grating screech of twisted metal. Mai nearly collapsed from the sudden loss of balance, but she couldn't afford to waste even a second. She rushed toward the man. "Sir, wake up. It's dangerous." Her voice trembled, but he remained unconscious, his head slumped against the steering wheel, eyes shut tight. The smoke thickened, seeping into her throat and making it hard to breathe. She slid her hands under his shoulders, struggling to pull him out, but he was too heavy. Exhaustion racked her body, her hands ached from strain, and for a moment it felt impossible. "I can't give up. He needs me." That thought alone kept her moving. Inch by inch, she dragged him out of the car, Just as she managed to pull him free, a small explosion erupted from the engine bay. Flames shot up violently, glowing red against the dim morning light. A wave of heat hit her face, forcing her to stumble back. A passerby witnessing the scene sprinted toward her. "Are you okay? Let me help." The young man wasted no time, quickly lifting the injured man into his arms. Together, they carefully placed him onto a motorbike. Molly climbed on behind, securing the man to prevent him from falling as they sped toward the hospital. She couldn't take her eyes off his face, pale, streaked with blood and sweat. Yet something about it stirred an inexplicable feeling within her. Worry, pain, as if she were fighting not just for his life, but for a piece of her own past that she had yet to understand. She whispered, a silent plea carried away by the wind. "You have to live. You must live. Please, don't make me witness another loss." Her words faded into the rushing air, but in my eyes burned a fragile yet fierce hope, like a lone flame struggling to withstand the storm threatening to consume it. Mai sat quietly on the cold bench in the hospital corridor, her eyes fixed on the tightly shut doors of the emergency room. Her heart felt heavy with unspoken worries. The surrounding space was eerily silent, suffocating even. Only the hurried footsteps of nurses and the distant beeping of medical machines echoed from other rooms, forming a disjointed melody against the stillness. She clasped her hands tightly, her slender fingers intertwined as if trying to hold on to the last shred of composure. But deep inside, a storm was raging, carrying with it memories from 8 years ago, so vivid and painful as if they had never faded with time. 8 years ago, Mai had been a young, passionate teacher, full of dreams, loving her job, cherishing the innocent smiles of her students, and believing wholeheartedly in a bright future. During a work trip to a remote mountainous region, the car she was traveling in suddenly got stuck on the road due to a heavy downpour. The relentless rain turned the dirt path into a muddy swamp. She stood in the freezing rain, shivering, uncertain of what to do as the sky darkened by the minute. Amidst her confusion, a car passed by and then stopped nearby. The door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, composed, exuding an air of quiet confidence. His deep voice was steady, reassuring. "Do you need help?" he asked, his gentle smile giving Mai an unexpected sense of security. His name was Fong, a businessman on his way back to the city. Not only did he help Mai fix her car, but he also offered her a ride to the nearest guest house to take shelter from the storm that was growing fiercer by the moment. Throughout the journey, they talked about work, life, and the small joys of everyday moments. Fong exuded confidence and sophistication, leaving a lasting impression on Mai. That night, the rain had yet to cease. Fong invited Mai to stay at the inn where he had stopped for the night. Though hesitant, she ultimately agreed as she had no other choice. They shared a simple dinner in the modest room, continuing their conversation, occasionally exchanging soft laughter amid the sound of rain pattering against the window. But that night, what seemed like a moment of warmth unexpectedly turned into a harrowing ordeal. Perhaps it was exhaustion from the long journey, or perhaps a fleeting moment of lost restraint. But Fong crossed a line that should never have been crossed. Despite Mai's desperate attempts to resist, she was unable to escape the horrifying situation. Panic and pain consumed her, but everything happened too quickly, like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. When dawn broke, Mai awoke to an empty room. Fong was gone, leaving her in shock and devastation. She didn't know how to process her emotions. Anger, sorrow, and helplessness all tangled within her. Returning to her hometown, Mai struggled to resume her life as if nothing had happened. Just a few weeks later, she discovered she was pregnant. She tried every way to contact Fong, but all she had was a vague name. No phone number, no address, no clues to hold on to. When she finally confessed the truth to her family, instead of receiving support, she was cast out. Fearing disgrace in the eyes of their neighbors, her parents coldly disowned her and forced her to leave their home. The whispers, the contemptuous glances from the neighbors followed Mai every time she stepped outside. Unable to bear the pressure any longer, she left her hometown, carrying her unborn child to a distant land. There she started over from nothing, living a quiet life, relying solely on her own hands to make a living. She poured all her love and strength into raising her son, Thien, but the wounds in her heart never truly healed. The memories of that fateful night, the fleeting dreams of the man she once met in the rain, clung to her like an unerasable scar. Now, sitting in the hospital, those memories surged back stronger than ever, gripping her so tightly she could hardly breathe. The unconscious man in the emergency room, his blood-streaked face, stirred a haunting familiarity that sent a painful shiver through her. Mai clenched her hands, telling herself it was just a coincidence. Yet no matter how much she tried to deny it, her heart pounded in her chest, reminding her that a part of her past was closer than ever. The man she had just saved was Fong. From the very moment he regained consciousness in the hospital, Fong felt an inexplicable unease creeping into his mind. Vague memories drifted in like a thick fog, present yet distant. The image of a woman, her worried eyes and petite yet resolute figure lingered at the edge of his memory. Fong tried to recall, but his memories were nothing more than fragmented pieces overlapping each other, like a strange dream he couldn't piece together. A few days after being discharged from the hospital, an inexplicable urge from deep within compelled him to seek out the woman who had saved him. It wasn't just about expressing gratitude, it was something stronger, a feeling that she held a missing piece of his past that he had yet to remember. As he stepped into the small house nestled beside a bamboo grove, his heart trembled slightly. The house was simple yet tidy, evoking a sense of familiarity intertwined with unfamiliarity. The woman standing before him had quiet eyes and callous hands that momentarily rendered him speechless. There was something in her gaze, a calmness laced with deeply buried emotions that made his chest tighten involuntarily. Fong expressed his gratitude with a few polite words, but when his eyes inadvertently lingered on Mai's face, a sudden rush of memory surfaced, slightly clearer this time. It felt as though he had met her before, at some significant moment he just couldn't place. As he was about to leave, Fong's gaze accidentally fell upon a young boy playing in the yard. The child was small, with bright eyes and an innocent smile, but what made Fong freeze in place was the eerie familiarity of that face. That boy bore an uncanny resemblance to him. The deep black eyes, the high-bridged nose, even that smile. It was as if Fong were looking at an old photograph of himself as a child. He stood motionless, unable to take his eyes off Thien. A wave of shock, confusion, and doubt surged through him. It's impossible, he told himself, but that thought alone couldn't quiet the storm in his mind. Something deep within him screamed that this was no mere coincidence. On the way back, the image of Thien lingered in his mind. Every detail of the boy's face seemed to etch itself into his memory. He couldn't push the thoughts away. Fong lay awake all night, tormented by restlessness and countless unanswered questions. In the end, he decided to ask his personal assistant to investigate Mai and the boy further. The initial information about Mai left Fong even more surprised. She was a single mother, living quietly and making a living by selling knives. She barely interacted with anyone and had no suspicious relationships. However, when his assistant sent him a photo of Thien 1 that had been secretly taken during the investigation, Fong felt as if he were being swept into a whirlwind of emotions. That child, with eyes and a smile that seemed to be copied straight from his own, was undeniable proof. Unable to endure the turmoil in his heart, Fong secretly took an item belonging to Thien for a DNA test. The results came back sooner than he had expected, but as he stared at the document in his hands, his heart felt like it had stopped beating. The words confirming the father-son relationship between him and Thien were clear as a verdict, leaving him utterly stunned. Fong's hands trembled, his eyes fixated on the paper as if trying to make sure he hadn't misread it. He sat frozen in his chair in a room filled with dim light, and then memories he thought had long faded over the past 8 years came rushing back. That rainy night, the thunder roaring in the sky, the relentless flashes of lightning, and the image of a young girl with terrified eyes. Fong remembered everything. The night he and Mai took shelter in that roadside inn. In that moment, he realized with a crushing weight that he had unknowingly caused wounds he had never even been aware of. For the past 8 years, this truth had struck a deep blow to Fong's pride and sense of responsibility. He didn't just regret what he had done, he regretted not realizing it sooner. 8 years. A long time in which his son had grown up without a father, while that woman had endured countless hardships and wounds alone. Fong stood up, his gaze resolute. He knew he couldn't change the past, but the present and future were still within his grasp. He couldn't ignore this truth, nor could he allow Mai to continue bearing everything on her own. A fierce determination rose within him. He would face Mai, confront the truth, and do whatever it took to make amends for his mistakes. But would Mai accept him? That question echoed in his mind, pulling him into a storm of emotions, where hope and anxiety intertwined, anticipating an inevitable confrontation. Fong arrived at Mai's house on a drizzling afternoon. The dim light filtering through the overcast sky made the small house by the bamboo grove appear even more solemn, mirroring the weight in his heart. In his hand was a simple basket of fruit, yet his mind was filled with countless tangled thoughts. He didn't know how to begin, didn't know where his words would lead. Only one thing was clear. He couldn't continue living with these doubts and this gnawing guilt. The door opened, and Mai's expression flickered with surprise at the sight of Fong standing before her. Strands of her hair were slightly damp from the rain. "What brings you here?" Her voice was low, yet cautious, as if bracing herself for an unavoidable confrontation. Fong stepped inside, setting the basket of fruit on the table, but not taking a seat. He stood across from Mai, his gaze serious, yet filled with an unusual sincerity. After a few moments of silence, Fong finally spoke, his voice hoarse and slow, each word carrying weight. I need to know the truth. Is Thien my son? The question sliced through the stillness of the room like a sharp blade. Mai froze, her eyes widening, her hands instinctively gripping the hem of her shirt. The words she had always feared confronting now echoed clearly, leaving her with no escape. Her heart pounded violently in her chest, her breath hitching as if she were suffocating. Yet Fong's gaze, filled with urgency and remorse, left her with no room to evade any longer. After a long silence, Mai slowly nodded. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Thien is your son, but you never knew, and I never wanted you to. I raised him alone, endured everything on my own, without expecting anything from you. You don't have to care, and you don't have to take responsibility. Fong was stunned, his heart clenched. Every word from Mai felt like a hammer blow, forcing him to confront the pain he had unknowingly caused. The woman before him, who had silently endured it all for 8 years, raising their child alone, facing struggles he had never even imagined. His voice trembled as he spoke. Mai, I don't know what I can say to make up for what you've been through, but please, give me a chance. I want to make amends. I want to be Thien's father. I want to make up for the years I've missed. Mai turned away, trying to hide her reddened eyes. You think just claiming him as your son is enough to make things right? Her voice wavered, laced with pain. You don't understand. You could never understand what I've been through. I don't need you. Thien doesn't need you. We've already learned to live without you. Mai spoke, her voice calm but resolute. Fong didn't argue. He simply listened, his eyes heavy with unspoken pain. After a long silence, he stepped closer, his voice steady yet gentle. Mai, I can't change the past, but I can do something for the present and the future. Thien is my son, and I want to take care of him. I don't want to disrupt your lives, but please, give me a chance to be his father. Just one chance. Mai turned to face him, her eyes conflicted. She wanted to refuse, to protect the peaceful life she had built with all her strength. But deep down she knew Thien deserved a father. And Fong, despite the pain he had caused, had the right to be one. After a moment of inner struggle, she took a deep breath and spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Fine, but under one condition. Fong's eyes flickered with hope. Tell me. Mai clenched her fists, her gaze firm. You cannot disrupt our lives. You cannot hurt my son. If you ever break this promise, I will leave and you will never see him again. Fong nodded, his voice steady. I promise. I will never hurt either of you. I will give everything I have to make up for the lost years, to ensure Thien never feels unloved. Mai studied him for a long moment before finally nodding. Her heart was still weighed down with uncertainty, but she knew. She had just opened a door, not just for Fong, but for Thien as well. A door that would lead to challenges, but perhaps also to a better future. After that emotional conversation, Fong began to appear more frequently in Mai and Thien's lives. Although Fong longed to be Thien's father, he did not rush to impose his role. Instead, he chose a patient approach, taking small steps, like a quiet companion in the lives of the mother and son. He understood that for Thien to accept him, words and titles were not enough. It had to be through presence, through genuine love. Every afternoon after school, Fong would wait outside the gate, holding a small treat, a cone of ice cream or a pastry. At first, Thien was hesitant. He would take the gift and quickly run home, but gradually the boy began to smile more. Sometimes he even lingered, asking a few curious questions about the stories Fong told. Fong listened patiently to everything Thien shared, from trivial school matters to his simple dreams. One day, when Thien complained about his old bicycle making a clanking noise every time he pedaled, Fong brought over a repair kit. He sat down on the ground, carefully unscrewing bolts, cleaning off grease, and adjusting each part with precision. Thien stood beside him, his eyes lighting up as he watched his bike work smoothly again. Uncle Fong, you're really good at this, the boy exclaimed. And then, without thinking, the words Uncle Fong turned into Dad Fong in an unexpected moment. One evening, Thien struggled with a difficult math problem. Mai was busy organizing her goods, unable to help him right away. Just then, Fong happened to stop by. He crouched down beside the boy, patiently explaining each step under the warm glow of the lamp. He guided Thien carefully, his eyes focused on the boy to make sure he understood. When Thien finally solved the problem, his face lit up with joy. Fong simply smiled, then gently ruffled the boy's hair. A small gesture, but one filled with warmth. As time passed, the bond between Fong and Thien grew stronger. However, the true test came on a cold, rainy night when Thien suddenly developed a high fever. Panicked, Mai rushed him to the hospital, his small body weak and exhausted. The moment Fong heard the news, he dropped everything and ran to them. Nothing else mattered. He stayed by Thien's bedside, tending to him with unwavering care, from gently placing a cool towel on his forehead to patiently coaxing him to take his medicine. Fong hardly left his side. Each time Thien gasped for breath or stirred in his feverish sleep, Fong's eyes filled with silent worry. From a distance, Mai watched quietly. The sight of Fong leaning over their son, his hands gentle, his gaze filled with warmth, stirred something deep within her. Her eyes turned red, but no tears fell. Instead, she felt something strange, an ache, a tenderness, a quiet sorrow. She knew now, Fong wasn't just trying to make amends. He truly loved Thien, like a father, a real father. When Tien's fever finally subsided, he slowly opened his eyes, weak but smiling. "Dad, Fong, have you been here all along?" Fong took his son's small hand in his own, his voice low and thick with emotion. "Yes, son, I'll always be here. No matter what happens, I will never leave you." Mai heard those words and something inside her tightened. She knew a new door had opened, not just for Fong, but for Thien, and for herself. Yet, did she have the courage to step through it? Or would she keep her heart shut, afraid of the wounds from the past? That question lingered in her mind, but for now, she simply wanted to cherish this moment of peace, watching the two most important people in her life. After many sleepless nights filled with thoughts, Mai finally made her decision. The wounds of the past had led her to build invisible walls, shielding both herself and her son. But as she watched Thien grow closer to Fong, saw him smile so freely, in a way she had rarely seen before, her heart wavered. She could no longer ignore the truth. Fong was doing everything he could to make amends, not just out of responsibility, but out of genuine love for their son. One afternoon, as Thien played in the yard, Mai invited Fong inside. She sat down across from him, her gaze steady yet tinged with contemplation. After a moment of silence, she spoke, her voice soft, yet weighted with meaning. "Fong, I've thought about this a lot. I cannot deny that you truly love Thien, but I need more time to trust that you will not hurt him, and that you will not disrupt the life we've built." Fong met her gaze, his eyes filled with sincerity. He nodded slightly, his voice deep but unwavering. "I understand, Mai. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, and I won't ask you to trust me overnight. But I promise you this. I will never hurt you or Thien. I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Mai remained silent for a moment, her eyes drifting toward the window. Outside, Thien was laughing, chasing after sparrows in the garden. "I hope you keep your promise," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "because if you don't, I will leave, and you will never see him again." Fong looked at Mai, his gaze unwavering. "I promise." He spoke, each word slow and deliberate, like a vow etched into his heart. As time passed, the bond between Fong and Thien grew stronger. Fong was no longer just a father, he became a companion in every moment of Tien's life. He helped the boy fix old toys, shared fascinating stories about the world beyond, and patiently taught him new things. Little by little, Thien opened his heart. He no longer saw Fong as just Uncle Fong. He had become an irreplaceable part of his life. One afternoon, as the three of them sat in the yard, Mai was laying out baskets of knives to dry in the sun. Suddenly, Thien turned to Fong, his voice filled with childlike innocence. "Ba Thong, do you know how to make a paper airplane? I want to learn to make a really nice one." His words were light as the breeze, yet they struck Fong like lightning. He froze, staring at Thien, his eyes glistening with emotion. Just one simple word, "Ba." But to him, it meant everything he had ever longed for. Fong smiled gently, trying to keep his composure, but he couldn't stop the tear that slipped down his cheek. "Yes, Ba will make one for you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Mai stood silently under the eaves, watching the moment unfold. And in that instant, something stirred within her. She saw the pure joy in Thien's smile, the sparkle of happiness in his eyes. For the first time in years, Mai felt something shift inside her. The scars of the past remained, but love was slowly soothing the pain. A part of her was still cautious, but another part, perhaps the part she had buried for so long, had begun to believe. Maybe, just maybe, they could truly become a family. From this moment on, Fong brought Mai and her son to a small house on the outskirts of town, where rolling green hills embraced the home like gentle arms. It was a cozy, well-equipped place, not extravagant, but perfectly suited to Mai's simple lifestyle. From their new home, they could wake up to the sound of birds chirping in the early morning and, at night, gaze at the twinkling lights of the distant town. Every detail of the house, from the softly swaying curtains to the wooden table by the window, had been carefully arranged by Fong. He didn't just want to build a house, he wanted to create a home, a sanctuary where Mai and Thien could find peace after the storms of life. Fong never pressured Mai to change her way of living. He understood that she was used to independence, to carrying the weight of life on her own shoulders. Instead of trying to alter that, he chose to simply be there. A quiet presence, a steady companion. He tended to the small garden behind the house, planting rows of flowers that Thien loved. Under the big tree in the yard, he built a wooden swing from old planks. a place where the boy could play and dream. Fong brought new books for Thien, helped Mai fix the drying rack for knives, and prepared dinner when she was too busy. Though unspoken, these small gestures spoke volumes, enough for Mai to feel the sincerity and love he poured into their lives. Every afternoon, the small yard was filled with Tien's cheerful laughter. He would run around chasing butterflies or mischievously climb onto the wooden swing that Fong had built for him. Fong often sat nearby, patiently telling him fascinating stories about animals and the wonders of the world beyond. Each time Tien's laughter rang out, Fong's eyes sparkled with joy, as if happiness flowed through every gesture he made. As for Mai, though she rarely spoke, every time she saw the two of them together, she couldn't help but feel a sense of peace settle within her. As time passed, Mai began to notice a change within herself. The pain and weariness she had carried for so long seemed to slowly fade, making way for a newfound serenity. Yet that peace was not always absolute. At times, she still questioned herself. Was she making the right choice? Was Fong's presence altering the life she had worked so hard to build for Thien? But every time she saw the boy's eyes light up as he called Ba Fong, she knew she had made the right decision. One chilly evening, Mai sat by the living room window, gazing outside. The wind rustled gently through the trees, creating a soft whispering sound. Inside, the warm glow of the yellow light illuminated the living room, where Fong and Thien were playing together. Fong leaned down, carefully guiding Thien in assembling a wooden ship model he had brought back from a recent work trip. The boy listened intently, his eyes bright with excitement, occasionally letting out small exclamations of joy whenever a piece fit perfectly. "Bob, how do I attach this part?" Thien asked, curiosity evident in his voice. Thien smiled gently and patiently explained, "Look, this joint has to fit with that piece to make it sturdy. Let me try it first." From a distance, Mai quietly observed. She wrapped her hands around a warm cup of tea, a complex wave of emotion surging through her. She watched as Thien beamed with pure happiness, his eyes shining with delight. Fong too smiled. A soft, tender smile she had never seen on him before. In that moment, the small room felt warmer than ever, as if it had gathered all the love they shared. Yet, deep inside Mai's heart, a quiet tension still lingered. She couldn't stop herself from thinking about the past, the wounds that had once made her shut herself away. She wondered, would this peace truly last? Or was it just a beautiful dream she dared not believe in? But then, her gaze rested on Thien, where every smile from the boy seemed to cast away the darkness lingering in her heart. She knew the past could not be changed, but the present and future could. At this moment, she realized she had finally found what she had been longing for all this time. Not perfection, but a true family. A place where love, understanding, and forgiveness resided. The story concludes with the image of Mai sitting by the window, her gentle eyes watching Thien and Fong laughing together under the warm golden light. Outside, a soft breeze whispered through the night, but within this small space, peace and warmth filled every corner. This was not a perfect ending, but rather a new beginning, one filled with hope, a journey where wounds could slowly heal, where those who had once been broken could find each other and build a home together. We sincerely thank you for taking the time to listen to and accompany us on this emotional journey. We hope that through every detail and every emotion, this story has brought you moments of reflection and meaning. This story stands as proof of the power of love, forgiveness, and hope. No matter how painful or filled with loss the past may be, if we open our hearts and embrace the present, the future can always be a new journey, one where happiness and peace are nurtured. If you enjoyed this story, please show your support by clicking the like button, letting us know that this story has touched your heart. Feel free to leave a comment below to share your thoughts, feedback, or any lessons you've taken from this story. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss our upcoming meaningful stories. Every small action from you is a great source of motivation for us to continue bringing valuable content. Thank you, and see you in the next story.